is to welcome our tepu, the inquiry panel, the chair, the Honourable Hekia Parata, and her associates, colleagues, Bill Bayfield and Matthew McCloy, to give them the warmest welcome. And then at that point, that will be my segue to hand it over to the Honourable Hekia Parata, who will set the context and for the inquiry. Followed very, very quickly by, and thank you all very much, because you've already identified who would like to stand up tonight. And so far we've got 122, no, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and a couple of after 8 o'clocks, okay? But chances are we might be having a sausage roll by then. So kia ora everybody, Jack Ane.
Kawa watatanga a te areki, horahia te marino, pukui mai kake mai, ko koe te wai ora, mo te ao katoa, kawa watatanga a te areki. Amen. E te atu kaharawa e tu wherenga ngā katoa kia koe, e moe ki ngā hihia katoa, e korangara koe te mea huna. Koroi o māta whakaare tō wairu tapu, kia pono ai tō māta āraha kia koe, kia tika ai te whakanui tō ingo tapu, a ko iu kai te hoki tō māta ariki. Māta wairu tapu arahi a tātou rote tēnei hui i tēnei ahiahi, whakaki o tātou whakaro, me o tātou koro, i tō wairua tapu, a ko iu kai te hoki i tō mātou ariki. Āmene. Ka huri.
Kia ora, Jack. Thank you very much. Mihi tonu atu ki a koe. Nā hau nei ngā kupu whakarite-rite i tā tātou noho tahi i tēnei pō. Nā reira, tēnā koe. O tira, tēnā tātou. Tēnā tātou i tēnei kaupapa a nui whakaharahara, nāna tonu tātou i tō mai ki konei te pōnei, me ki pēnei. Hara mai rā tātou hoki i te āhuetanga ki o tātou tini aitua, ki o tātou tini mate. O tira ia te hunga kari konei tēnei rā, te kaipukahu hoki, i roto anō i ngā rangi, i ngā marama pātata nei. Nā reira, ai, me ki pēnei koutou kia koutou. Tātou e pai nei, e parekuhi nei, e whakaro nui nei te haramai tēnei pō tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou kia ora tātou katoa. Tēnā hoki tātou i te kaupapa e noho nei te tepu i tēnei pō. E te minita o muara. Te tāhuhu o te mātauranga hekia me ohua. E ho noho nei i tōtaha. Nau mai haramai ki te kāinga ko Pepe Hatia, ko titerangi te maunga, ko uawa nui, a rua matua te awa. Ko te rāwhioro te whare wānanga, ko hene matioro taku piki kōtuku, ko te kani a takirau, te upoko ariki, ko parikura horomia te kāinga akau. Haramai hoki koutou. Haramai hoki koutou ki te aitanga hauiti nui tonu tēnei e mihi nei, tēnei e tangi nei. Nā reira, kia ora tātou, and great to see everybody here tonight. At this point, it gives me great pleasure to pass the mic over to the Honourable Hekia Parata, who will set the terms of reference, among other things, for our hui tonight.
Tēnā koutou te whai wā, te haramai nei ki tēnei hui. I tēnei ahi ātāhua kei roto i tēnei rohe o Hauiti o Uaonui. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, kei te tikata Victor, he take tino nui tēnei, he uaua hoki, he taumaha ki etahi o ōna taha, ko etahi he tūmanako ka whai tātou etahi o ngā ronga mō tēnei kaupapa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā koe pā, nā hau i tīmata tātou i hanga e koe te arawhata ki te rungarawa, tēnā rawātu koe. Kia koe Victor, ngā mihi nui kia koe te whakai mai kia mātou tēnei mahi hau mō hau, ne? Te wā tuatahi tēnei, te whiriwhiri kaupapa, te whakahaere hui. Hoi anora tēnā koe, Victor. Huri noa i tō tātou whare i tēnei ahi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you very much for the opportunity to meet with you this afternoon and into the very early evening. My job is firstly to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me, and then ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then I'll take the mic back, and as Victor's already indicated, I will provide a bit of a context, not only for the terms of reference for this inquiry, but the way that we as the panel have chosen to structure our approach. And that will perhaps help you to structure your contributions or completely ignore it, and that's entirely up to you, because the main point of our being here is for you to see who this inquiry panel is and for us to listen to you. So, as I said, I'm Hekia Parata. I was born in Waipiro Bay and brought up and educated at Manutahi Primary School and then Ngata Memorial College before going to Gisborne Girls High and on to the University of Waikato, because I do have a very tiny streak of contrariness in that everyone else was going to Victoria and Wellington, so I headed in the other direction. I come from a very big family. Very symmetrical family, 5 boys and 5 girls, the youngest and the oldest born exactly 20 years apart, sharing therefore the same birthday. And one of those siblings is well known to this community, and she will be so hoo-ha that I am identifying her, but I am so proud of my sister. She is a stunning educationalist and a leader of education, and understands that the curriculum is not some dead written piece of paper, that it must come alive in the classroom, where that classroom is the entire community, and that it comes alive for all learners. So I just want to acknowledge how proud I am of you, Nori, and I know you won't be enjoying this. Thank you, Padre. I could go on and on, apparently, but I won't. And so that's who I am. And I have been this week, this is my 40th anniversary week of being a public servant. Working firstly in government departments. My first job was as a diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm well known for my diplomacy. And so I then travelled through a number of government departments, met and married a wonderful, wonderful man, he hoa tino nui aia kia parekura, a te harawira mōhio koe Padre, and then he and I worked together in all sorts of public service roles, and the one that is most public is having been a minister in the John Key Bill English government, where I was honoured to be have a range of portfolios, one of which was energy and resources. If anything could go wrong, it did. And that was equally true of then taking on the education portfolio, which has been the best job I have ever had. Loved it, loved to see how we could make a system work so that all New Zealand students could do well in our system. Kia ora Rawiri. And I had a great band of people who worked with me. Okay, so that's me, and now here I am chairing this inquiry. With another hat, I'm also on the Royal Commission for COVID-19, the lessons that we've learned, and how we prepare for the next pandemic. When I was asked if I would chair this inquiry, I was so committed in these next chapters of my life to be working directly for Tai Rāwhiti, because I have spent most of my life working around the country and around the world, and I was very determined to be able to do practical, helpful work here at home. I've been asked, it's been suggested to me that I can't be independent. That's how I'm characterised, the independent chair of this inquiry. And so to be clear, I am a very independent thinker, but I am not impartial. I am absolutely partial to the best possible set of outcomes that this inquiry is able to deliver for this rohe of Ngāti Porou Whānui, for Tūranganui a Kiwa, and out to Te Wairoa. So that's what our job is going to be, and we are committed to it. So I'm now going to ask my colleagues, Bill Bayfield and then Matt McCloy, to introduce themselves, and then I'll come back quickly and frame up the inquiry itself, and then we will look forward very much to hearing from you. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko waia hao, ko Bill Bayfield hao. I don't know how I follow that, so I won't even really try. I didn't have the benefit of being born on the East Coast. I was born in Ghana in Africa and came out to New Zealand when I was 4. I spent all my growing up years, though, basically under the shadow of Taranaki Moanga alongside Te Atiawa, and basically they gave me my education. And so that was very much appreciated. I too went to Waikato University, where I did soils and botany. And that kind of set me up for my first job, which was actually as a soil conservator in Taranaki, and kind of grew from there. Over the last few years, though, I've managed to make it to the point that I was the Chief Executive Officer of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council to the north, and then the Chief Executive Officer for the Canterbury Regional Council, ECAN, in the South Island for 10 years post the earthquakes. And the last 3 years, I've been working as a CEO of the new water regulator, which has arisen out of the Three Waters reform, Taumata Arawai, and that's been a real exciting 3 years for me. I jumped, the minute I heard that this was on offer, I jumped at it. It's funny to look at how things do run in strange cycles and strange family ways. My wife, Maggie, also a botanist, she was involved in 1998 and in 2005 in the reviews of the East Coast Forest Accord with Anton Meister. So she has given me very careful instructions, and that I will follow those to the letter. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm very grateful to be able to listen to you today. Try and do as little talking as possible and as much listening.
Hi, I'm Matt McCloy, and yes, it's a hard act to follow Hekia, but I am from a fairly large family as well. I'm the youngest of 8, and we have 4 on each side too. So I know what the sibling rivalry that goes on. I'm a forest engineer. I was lucky to be the first forestry engineering graduate from Canterbury University back in the early 90s. I then shifted north from Canterbury up to around Rotorua and worked out of Murupara for a while, and then in 1993 I came over here and I worked for a company here for 5 years. I was tutored well by overseas engineers into how to do things, and not necessarily the Kiwi way. Since then I've worked around the world. Most recently did 3 years with a Finnish and Swedish company in China, and that was a technologically and culturally challenging environment, but using the most Rolls-Royce machinery in amongst manual harvesting and villages and varying archaic ways of farming was incredibly sort of uplifting, and it gives you a good base into what sustainability really is. And sorry, but clear felling 4,500 hectares in 3 years is not sustainable. So no doubt some of that will come up tonight. But we're here for land use, and it's land use and sustainable land use, the impacts of station sediment on that. So we're here to listen.
Well, so that's us. You've got a bit of a snapshot of who it is that's been entrusted with this inquiry. So I'm going to quickly run through just the framing of the inquiry, and then we'll hand over to Victor, and you tell us what you think. And thank you very much for being prepared to do that. So the first thing is that this inquiry is 8 weeks long. We are required to report to 2 ministers by the 30th of April. The 2 ministers who commissioned this inquiry are David Parker as Minister for the Environment and Stuart Nash as Minister for Forestry. We've been asked, can you get it done in that time? Yes, because that's the time we have. So that is what we will do. The terms of reference direct our attention to land uses across those 3 districts I talked about, or those 2 territorial authorities of the Wairoa District Council and the Gisborne District Council. And we are asked to look at woody debris, of which forestry pine is a significant part, and to look at sedimentation. We are also asked to look at the impact of weather events on people, on livelihoods, on animals, on infrastructure, all of that. We are asked to look at the economic incentives, the economic drivers, the economic obstacles to land use. And we are asked to look at what is the current legislative context for land use. And some of you may know, for instance, that the Resource Management Act is under review or reform, and that there are currently 2 bills in Parliament being considered, one about the natural and built environment, and one about spatial planning. And there are also national environmental statements that are issued by the Minister for the Environment that give instructions to local authorities that they then translate into how they set the operational framework for their area. So we're asked to look at those, and then we're asked to make recommendations. And so, to help you understand the approach that we are taking, while it is 8 weeks, we have prioritised the first half, the 4 weeks, for engaging with communities, with sector groups, with individuals, and, well, pretty much with whomever wants to meet with us. So we have been through the rohe, in a plane, not my favourite thing, bouncing around in a little 6-seater, but one must be loyal to Air Ruatoria. And so do feel free. There is first class, business class, and economy. Only 2 people in each, one of which, of course, is the pilot. And we flew from Gisborne to Te Araroa earlier this week, and then drove from Te Araroa to Ruatoria over what masquerades as State Highway 35. Oh, we're not yet. Sorry, yeah, people know there's television here, and that's not just Dex. And we've had those. We've been in Wairoa. We've run online meetings. We've met both mayors and their chief executives. We've met the Eastland Wood Council. We have met the Manataiao petitioners, your own Hedda Gibson, who organised, or was one of the organisers of that. We have met as many groups and participants who want to meet with us as possible. We are very aware that our communities have had to literally weather significant events over the last 18 months, but indeed over decades. So we have heard from older members of communities about the 1938 floods and the 1941. I might be getting those dates a little bit wrong, but the point is, it isn't just the last 18 months that our communities, because of our location, have been subjected to weather events. That's now being made worse, of course, by climate change and the earth heating up. And can I recommend to you that, the IPCC has published yesterday the latest on climate change, and there is a chapter on Australia and New Zealand about what we can do. And I can see these lovely young people here, and Jock, that in green, who are contributing to the management of climate change, as I hope all of us are in our own particular ways. So that's what the first 4 weeks are about. And then, because we are aware that people are still recovering, states of emergency highlight it, but everything isn't just fixed up, as you know better than me, when that ends. So we haven't wanted to burden you with only having written submissions, but we have wanted to make that opportunity available as well. So if anyone also wants to submit in writing anything you want to say, then you must feel free to do that. However, it must be in by the end of the 6th of April. So it's the 22nd today, so that's 15 days from now. And if you go to www.Ministry for the Environment, they will have the link on there, as is on to Punikokiri and the Ministry of Primary Industries website as well. So that is as well. These meetings were to try not to have you feel that the only way that your thoughts could be included was to write a submission in the middle of everything else you're doing. But it is there, and you are most welcome to contribute that. Okay, so the second half, the second 4 weeks during which we have to write the report, we are thinking of it right now. This could change, informed by the meetings we're having, that we have identified 5 time arcs. The first is the first 12 months from when we report will be recommendations about how to deal with woody debris and sediment, / on the beaches, / in river mouths, / down the sides of creeks, / across paddocks, / under bridges. So the recommendations from our inquiry, the first lot will have a 12-month time frame, what we recommend should be done about that. The second time arc we think will be about 2 years, which is to make our observations and recommendations as to whether the regulations and the operational settings and the implementation of them by the GDC and the Wairoa District Council, whether that's being effective, if not, why not, and what can we recommend about that. The third time arc is a 5-year one, and that's when we want to be able to make recommendations about what kind of economic incentives, constraints, levers should be developed to support long-term sustainable, optimal land use. So that's what that will be about. The fourth time arc will be about 10 years, and that will be the opportunity to transition from where we are now to where we might want to go. That's when we would make recommendations there. And the fifth, which I am most excited about, having recently become a very doting grandmother, is what's the big vision we have for our mokopuna and their mokopuna over the next 100 years, the next 200 years, okay? So that's what those 5 time periods are. 12 months for immediate a focus on / and sedimentation, 2 years for looking at the settings and the regulations that are required by law, 5 years for what sort of economic levers. Most of that tends to come to us in terms of the ETS and what's incentivised there. And then 10 years for a transition from where we are now to where we think we want to start going, because none of this can happen really quickly. And then the big vision, whatever that is, okay? So that's what we are proposing. And I also should say that we are not on anybody's side, any particular land use, any particular reason. We are on the side of the future for sustainable, good lives, and for people to have the conditions where they are able to make good choices for themselves. So we would really appreciate in any of your commentary, where were we when we had all the mobile phones? Te Araroa cannot be beaten for mobile phones going off during a hui. And there were a few nannies there who obviously had decided on the strategy of, if it starts ringing, I'll just pretend it's not my phone till it stops ringing. So anyway, it was just the cutest hui. Where was I? Okay, so that's how we've structured it. So we really welcome your comments. Any kind of comment is welcome. We'd appreciate that if you are going to take the opportunity to speak when you stand up, if you could just say who you are and if you're representing anybody, that helps our panel and me to keep a track of who we've heard from. The other thing, sorry, I can commit to you is that if we decide that we want to use a quote or we want to use a characterisation, somebody told us something, we will come back and check with you if we decide we want to do that. We will not publish anything without checking with the person or group that we wanted to reflect. And finally, who's helping us do this? Well, there are 3 of our, mā te huruhuru ka rere te manu. Well, ko au te manu, koenei ngā parirau, koe rā ngā huruhuru ka rere. And so first of all, kei te kohere, with a name like that, can only come from the Cape. Keita is with the Ministry for the Environment, is by background a planner, and is the lead for our Secretariat. On my left is Nicole Nepe, who's from Patutahi, and we were at Ngātapa, Ian Kirkpatrick country, well actually Nicole Nepe and her mother's country last night. Nicole is a chief advisor across the country about the legislation and constraints, the funding and support that Te Puni Kōkiri can offer to landowners and shareholders in whenua Māori. And of course, we know it's not whenua Māori, over here it's whenua ahake, 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 right? And so that's what the expertise Nicole brings. And then Sarah Pohatu, who you just cannot shut up, talks all the time. That's a joke for anybody who knows Sarah. Sarah Pohatu is both from around the coast and from the other side of Gisborne, and also comes from a background in farming, or at least her tipuna do. So that's our little team. Thank you very much for welcoming us here. Sorry that this has gone on longer than we had intended. Really look forward to hearing what you have to say. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora Hekia. And under strict instructions from Dexter, we do want you to use the mic when you get up to speak. And on that note, I have gone around, I've explored the attendance tonight, and we've got 10 speakers. I understand some have come in late, and so, in no particular order, but from 1 to 10, I'm going to read your name out. People can decide whether they give you a round of applause or not. No. From 1 to 10, there were a couple of question marks. Some people were not too sure. They wanted to hear what Bruce has got to say, and then they would sort of launch in. But so I'm going to read out the names, And I guess, unless there's someone to come and help me, I'll bring the mic to you. I've actually already done my 10,000 steps today, but I'm willing to put another couple of thousand. So our first speaker tonight, without further ado, is Clive. Number 2, he's number 1, Clive. So if you just sit there for a sec while I read them all out. Clive, thank you. Second is Bruce. Third, Linda. Fourth, Jen, ka pai. To the back there with you, cousin Totini. All right, and sitting right next to you, Tui, we'll see how we go about then, ka pai, after Tot, ka pai. Ka pai, that's what he said. Okay, now there's 2 Seans sitting on the same row there. Sean, we'll see which one of you wants to speak first, but that's at number 2E6. Sean and Sean are 7 and 8 respectively. Number 9 is Uawa Nui. Oh, and Anne is in there too. Okay, so Anne after Sean, if that's okay, cousin. All right, so Anne after Sean. And then we've got Uawa Nui, and finish it with Anne's niece, Hannah, at the back there. Ka pai. Understanding that others might have a burning ambition to get up and say something, I'm just reminded of a wonderful quote from the Honourable Parekura Horomia. Around about 5:30, if you smell the pork, cut it short. And I think we got bacon on the menu tonight. So we're looking around then to close it all off. So without further ado, Clive, could I ask you to, I'll bring the mic to you if you like, or you're welcome to come up here. What's our length, 4 minutes? Okay, 4 minutes. Kia ora, Clive. Clive is the most concise gentleman I know. Is that right, Mike?
Kia ora. Thank you very much. And may I congratulate the committee on being considered worthy enough to be appointed to this role, which is for us a most extremely important appointment. We are grateful that the government, after originally deciding that we were only worth a review, have been overruled, and now we have an inquiry. And I am grateful that the terms of reference that you have announced tonight should be sufficient for us to get results that will benefit us all. Let's move on a little bit in explaining why I'm unfortunately sceptical of what this inquiry might achieve. And the main reason is partly because I'm an old bugger and I don't take kindly to people telling us what we already know. But I'm sceptical because the minister responsible for forestry has been a reluctant contributor to this whole inquiry, and he's even come out and said that he's not going to be bound by any of the recommendations that you come up with. Well, that's a pity, because it pretty much announces things that we would have preferred not to have heard. However, let's deal with things as we see them. This room here today is filled with people who, like me, are humble but not stupid. I think those of you who do know most of us in this room will realise that we are looking at a situation which is pretty dire, and our future is inextricably linked to the solutions that you find out of this inquiry. So what we do as a community is to try and make that happen, is to offer our support and give you the benefit of our knowledge and experiences, particularly those who have lived and worked at the coalface for so long, and know what has happened, why it's happened, and we're pretty sure of who's responsible. So I would encourage the inquiry to, if you do nothing else, is to really try and get to talk to those people who have suffered at the coalface, because they have the information that you need. They are in a position, particularly the older members of this community, who have been through this many times, and so we're in a position where we can offer comparative observations, not only as to the individual cyclones that are going right back to Bowler, but we can also, probably more importantly, recommend or make an assessment of the different types of government responses to those cyclones, because that's going to be very important when we're deciding what government assistance comes out of this, and we all hope and support you in your endeavours to find out what actually occurred. Thanks very much.
Kia ora, Clive. Well done. Humai te paki. Concise and succinct. Thank you. Bruce, do you want me to bring you the mic, or you'd like to come up here? Over here. I asked, Nikki, are you speaking, Bruce? Yeah.
Kia ora tātou. My name's Bruce Jefford. I've been in the community quite a long time now. I was quite young during Cyclone Bowler and probably a little bit more resilient, and probably had a bit more energy and get up and go when it came to sort of repairing flooded houses and flooded farms and things. But so yeah, I'd have to say this, it certainly knocked me around. I wasn't in too good a headspace for a week or so, probably longer than a week. And my wife wasn't too good either, so it wasn't much fun. Someone said to me, sort of, don't look at the big picture, just look at one thing at a time, and you sort of, it certainly works if you sort of concentrate on one job at a time. And I'm certainly a lot better now. One of the points I'd like to make is that Cyclone Bowler was a hell of a storm in terms of the volume of rain and things. It was basically sort of unprecedented in New Zealand. I think we got Wellington's annual rainfall in 3 days. And I used to say to people, oh, we'll get medium scale events, we'll get these sort of scary events where we get 300, 400, 500 millimetres of rain, but we won't get another Cyclone Bowler. Well, we sort of did. I mean, I think region-wide, Cyclone Bowler was probably worse. It carved up more hill country. But for us, I'm farming 3 k's north on the, just where the Kiowa Road starts, basically. The flood this time was very similar. It was maybe fractionally lower, some of the water levels, but one of the points I'd like to make is about slash. Slash is not just the slash that's on our beaches, in the rivers, wrecking the estuaries, sort of wrecking the whole sort of river system ecology in the beaches, but it actually creates the flood too, because apart from the fact that it's left lying on paddocks and whatever else, my view is that we basically had half the amount of rain that we had in Cyclone Bowler, and we had a flood very similar. So the slash actually exaggerates the flood, apart from the mess it leaves. But and how they're going to stop it, and whether we can, I'm just nervous about every rain event now, because there's so much slash in the system. After 2018, there was a huge amount of slash left at the sort of bottom end of the Mangatokarau Valley, and the forestry company said they'd move it, and I don't think they moved one log. And then half of that Mangatokarau bridge has become quite famous for the amount of debris it can sort of hold without giving way. But I think the then manager of Hikarangi Forest Farms told me it was a 10,000 hectare catchment, which is huge, and if there's, I think it was mentioned tonight by one of you guys here, but if you're harvesting 4,000 hectares at once over 3 or 4 years, over 5 years, and you get a big rain event, you've got one God almighty bloody mess, you know. And I'd be interested to know if any of you, when you did that flight from up the coast, did you see any buffer zones as such? Did you see any areas where they've got several rows of trees protecting creek beds or rivers? You did? Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to hear that, because I was a bit sceptical and thought that perhaps there wouldn't be anything in the way of buffer zones, but I know they started harvesting the Waipari forest not long after we'd had our meeting in 2018 here, when we had our first sort of crisis with slash on the beaches and things, and that they just harvested that right down to the edge of the Hikawai River, which is part of the Suawa system. So the forestry companies weren't really paying much, you know, they weren't sort of practicing what they were about to preach. But yeah, I guess my big concern is that the slash that's in the system now, and you know, can we wait 12 months? If we get another big rain event, we've just got another God almighty mess. So yeah, sure. Okay. Right. Right. So with a bit of luck, in a month or two, there might be some legislation that demands that they have buffer zones. You're not sure of it. Yeah. Yep. All right. Thanks very much.
Cool. Thanks, Bruce. Round of applause, please. Oh, kia ora, Linda. Would you like me to bring you the mic, or are you? That's all right. Here you go. Doing well.
Kia ora, Linda Tātare, Anoa Bay. Not a lifelong resident of 5 years, 6 years, but you all know Jack, and it's his home. Hekia, please. 18 months is not long enough. Let's go back to Queen's Birthday weekend 2018. That's when the issues that we all suffer on farms and the like began. So limiting it to 18 months leaves out, you know, a very, very important year. So just so what I wanted to touch on was, in the Bay, we didn't suffer too much from the hail and Gabrielle. Our issues, although go back to 2018. And the notion that we're resilient is a false notion. We're all suffering. Like Bruce, we all fear the storm, lie in bed at night watching Met Service rain radar, and going through hell, as we know, homes are being flooded in the Bay. You're aware that March last year was our event, and it knocked us, particularly Jack and I. We lifted the old urupa, so that's been lifted, and we are now considering what to do with our pa and that urupa, like many other places on the coast. Now, these aren't directly related to slash or anything like that. This is storm related, but what it does is weaken the spirit. It weakens our strength to support one another in the community. It makes us more reliant on helicopters and planes coming into places like the Bay to support us, because quite frankly, we're over it. When you've got members of the community having to be tied to lassoed and brought out of an area where that resident was chest deep in water, where you've got raging torrents down culverts that if you misstep in the dark, you're gone. So these sorts of things. Now, we know not to move in the dark. We don't know what's out there. We can only hear the hell that's happening around us. But I want to touch on something and that's kai. That's our kāpata kai. That we have this bloody slash and this pine forest floor rubbish washing up on our beaches. It's either floating or it's sunk, and it's decomposing in the sea on our kai beds. A crayfish is not some luxury that we pay $100 for in some restaurant in Auckland. It's kai on the table for us. It's what sustains us. You here know what it's like not to have a feeder kina. You go away and you come home and you want that feeder kina. We're putting a survey, we're talking currently, Jack and the Takutai Trust are currently talking and approve with a chap to get some guys into the bay to start surveying Motuoroi, the cave area, and Tangoio. We need to know what damage has been done to our reefs, what logs are lying submerged in those places. We need to know what silt is clogging our kai system in the sea. The forestry companies offer to clean beaches, but they're not saying a single word what's lying out in Tolaga Bay. They're not saying a single word about what's lying on under the water in Anoa Bay, a place where people from Gisborne, Rangitukia, Tiki come to get their pico bag to go home and have a kai. It's food I'm talking about, that which sustains us on the coast. And if I'm angry, I'm angry about it, because there's just no fishing. There's no fishing at the moment because of storms, and the nor'easterly has played havoc with the beach. Gabriel, okay, so we didn't get the flooding that you've had, and we don't have the silt in the bay that you've had, but our hills are beginning to fall since March last year. The farm has lost a lot of land. But that's old farming practices. I'm prepared to say it. It's old farming practices on steep hills that face a nor'easterly gale. But what we've also got happening in the bay is 5 to 6 metre nor'easterly swells smashing our beach with logs in those waves. Sure, we don't have the logs that you have here, aroha mai. But we're still losing. And in Gabriel, we lost on average 4 metres of the dune system. But in the last 5 years, we've lost in places 12 metres. We will be we are being forced to make really serious decisions. So if the companies are only thinking about the land, let me ask you to start thinking about what's happening on our seafloor. Cheers. Thank you.
Kia ora, Linda. Thank you. Ka pai. Kōka Jenny, would you like to pop up here? How's the sound down the back there? Daniel, all good? Oh, ka pai.
Kia ora, I'm Jenny Keynes. I'm a teacher at the local school here at Tolaga. So I just want to share with you a personal experience. I came to Tolaga 18 years ago. I brought a piece of land up Tauwhiri Pārai Road, 20 k's up. So it's the old Doonholm station. It's a historical site. On Hale, I'll tell you why I brought it, because it was beautiful. It was just a stunning valley. It was called a hidden valley by the previous owners. The water ran on the surface. Every tree that fell created a little environment, a little ecosystem. It was an absolutely beautiful place. hail, it took my bridge. So no longer could I get to my little whare. Okay, so I paid to get somebody to come and put the bridge back. Next event, Gabriel took that bridge, took the old dip, took massive trees. I've now got tons of logs across my paddock. The river's moved, it's in the middle of the paddock. I've got no ability to cross there anymore. So basically I can't live there anymore. I visited with my husband on the weekend. To live there, under normal circumstances, I carry diesel to get to my generator. There's no way that I can carry diesel across stones for half a mile to get to my generator. So that's it. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I just have to wait.
Kia ora, folks. Ka pai, Jen. Thanks for that. Cousin Toad, you all right? Oh. Ai, ka pai tui. Anei, Chief.
Kia ora tātou. Kia ora Hekea. We went to school together, so yeah, I was at Gisborne Boys High when you were with Auntie Noi, and we were both in the Māori club at Gisborne Boys High together. So it's been a few years, but welcome. It's good to see that there is an inquiry. We've waited so long for it, and it's about time it happened. I'm a born and bred Hawaiian, proud of it, and I've recently moved back to Tolaga to retire, but I've been busy working here more than I did when I was working for Air New Zealand. One of the things that I'd like to ask the panel is, what are we going to do when the majority of the forests are in foreign ownership? You know, we can't do a lot about these people sitting in their ivory castles overseas, because that's where the problem is. They're the ones that make all the profits, they get all the money, and we get all the rubbish. You know, there is also recently sitting before the GDC, there's a forest on our doorstep called Caribou, named after some deer in Alaska. And what they plan to do here in Tolaga is have a bloody great big yard, log yard, before GDC. It's they've got a consent before the council at the moment. Something that we are looking into. So most of these are foreign owners, and we can't do squat about it. You know, Stuart Nash has only come to the party because he got his backside kicked on his doorstep. That's the first time he's actually done something. You know, something happened in Napier, it affected him directly. But that's not my main point, is what are we going to do about the foreign owners? Thank you.
Kia ora, Toad. Gee, that must have been a great kapahaka group back in the day. Tūranga wahine, tūranga tāne. Okay, tui, kua riri koe krau? Daniel. Oh, kia ora, Sean. Daniel, do you want to, Sean, do you want to hold the mic? There you go, mate.
No, up this way. Up this way. Pea no tēnā tātou katoa. Me tīmata pēnei au, ko tōku ingoa ko tui tuakana maki o marino. Ko tāku tētahi o aku e waha kōrero kai kawe kreme. I'm a claimant, iwi hapu claimant of te aitanga hau i te iwi. but like many others, our interests are focused towards our tamariki mokopuna. And whānau whānui kohanga reo, in Uawa, is one that has the pepeha, ko titiragi te mauga, Uawa, te awa, te aitanga hauiti te iwi. So if we look at that type of time frame there, we're talking about this kōrero here is also on behalf of ngā mokopuna, kai ngā kohanga reo, that are under that mana of that pepeha, that are not only in Uawa, that are in other areas throughout the Tairāwhiti, huri no te motu, huri no te ao. Me pēnei anō hoki taku kōrero, ko Uawa nui a rua matua, te pūmana o te iwi, e kōrero nei a Victor. Mai, i te ngutu a ngore, a te whānau a te ao tāwarirangi, nāwa ko te whānau a rua taupare, me tahi atu a ngā hapu o reira, whakawhiti atu ki tūranga, te awa tūranga nui. Ki te mana o reira, ki a ngā te oni onu. Hoki mai ki tū kaipō, ki Uawa, ara i kōrero hi ake nei ko titiragi te mauga Uawa te awa te aitanga hauiti te iwi. Koe nei tāku I kōrero hi ake nei, because we've got in the Tokomaru Bay, it's well known. Hango hoki ki roto I Rangati Prau, ki roto nei Tokomaru ākau, tātou nei ko nei. So we're looking at, I think it needs to be looking at the generational, intergenerational. So you're looking at the tamariki mokopuna and their tamariki mokopuna, koe nei te titiro. And I think I would urge the inquiry to consider the importance of that in terms of cultural perspective. And the other concern is the possibility of cultural / affecting the mana motuhake o te iwi me ana hapu karangarangatanga. Here we've got the listing of hapu down the east coast, and as has been said by the speaker just before me, te aroha ki o tātou moana. Hago hoki te whenua, e ka ringa kai moana, he momo wana anō hoki tēra. So these are most of the hapu, kai konei e whārangi nei, and this is the rohe, and this diagram here is put together by our friend Stuart, and NA has the hapu and their area of whenua. So this is the idea that we're getting when we look at the maps or those that are on the Mana Taiao Facebook page, and we see the ridges, because what's being talked about here is only below the ridge lines. I think it's really important to consider the bulk of slash that's still laying on the ridge lines and all along the cliff faces in that sort of area. And I think we're missing the point if we go just looking at the awa and not the ridge lines. I think it needs to start from the ridge lines on behalf of ngā mokopuna, me ngā hapu. The other thing is that we have to have a longer time frame, and that is there needs to be a planting regime. Te Uawa Nui a Rua Matua thankfully already got underway, and they're really strong, and I think there needs to be an upgrade of the funding towards those groups that are working in the taiao, because that is where our safety barrier is for our future regenerations lie. And those that are compensation towards the damage, or the Crown should upgrade the funding to those particular groups, and there needs to be a reintroduction of Manuka, because we talk about the funding sort of aspects and that sort of thing. And Manuka honey is well known for its health uses, etc., etc. And Manuka places and Tawhiti blocks in Tokobari Bay, you look at all those hills, all the natives there holding well. So that's an example from the taiao of what needs to be done. Those are the main parts that I want to sort of emphasise, and also, it needs to be a longer time frame, not just over a 5 year, it needs to look in decades at a time. And the key part to all of that, I think, is what tikanga under tikanga Māori, kai raru I te mana whenua, kai raru I te mana moana. There's a rāhui. And what I think us as a collective of hapu and iwi can and should consider a rāhui across all these areas that have been affected and are likely to affect the future well-being of our paimaunga, me ngā awa, huri atu ki te moana. There needs to be a rāhui that goes for probably a decade, because that's the time it might take for the areas that have been pounded by the rain and wind, etc., for those areas to recover. And to try and undercut that time and rush through it, we're actually missing the point, and your inquiry will fail, in my humble opinion. And of course this is the next generation after me, and then the mukapuna kai roto nā kohanga wik. Nā reira hekea, koutou, te tepu, huri no tātou, tēnā koutou, mauri ora.
Kia ora tui. Ka pai, Sean. Too much, Daniel. Good to see you guys. Okay. Don't forget, send a photo in of the map. Okay. Sean Mitchell Haraki. Sean Mitchell. Ka pai.
Kia ora everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm pretty nervous, but I've obviously wear sort of two hats or whatever. 25 plus years in the forestry. We were one of the victims in obviously the 2018 floods. We lost everything, so I can relate to what Bruce and them were talking about. So I'd given my life to the industry and sort of felt like that was the last straw. We'd lost the last little bit to the industry, but passionate about our land, our whenua, our awa, the ocean, do a lot of diving, have that privilege, a lot of hunting, fishing, so I suppose I'm here, I can sort of share because we, obviously forestry industry ain't going to like some of the things I say, but there has been a lot of change in the industry out there. It's not showing, like obviously down here, but in the headwaters it's certainly getting done, so I can vouch for them there. But I'd like to, it was shared in the 2018 discussion here, sort of an inquiry was made and will come of that. I got up and spoke then. One of the other guys said, if we got our rubbish and went and dumped our shit on somebody else's property, we would be made to uplift it and get rid of it. That's what needs to sort of happen. But the shit just can't be left on farmers' lands, along our hours. It's got to be uplifted. It's got to be, you can come down and make the bridge look all pretty, but all this shit is on the river edges, the headwaters. But like I say, thousands of dollars has been spent trying to correct that. The 2018 inquiry was released in 2020, saying slash nets were required, big slash nets, so that was brought up here. Consent still hasn't been given today for some of those. So the forestry are getting slapped around due having done nothing. Like no names in particular, but they're getting slapped around for having done nothing, but they are bound by our governing consents and all that stuff. So I suppose it's trying to share with the public, like I say, they're obviously copying it all down here. So it's to share with them what's going on in the background of the forestry sector as well, as in the, yeah. So it's sort of, it's hard because like I say, we've been on both ends, or we come from fifth generation farming here as well ourselves, so no longer farming now, but so been in the region a long time. But we are also, this is the consequence of a decision that was made 30, 40 years ago. So if we make any extreme decisions again, well, we're going to be in the same spot again, you know. So all the farm cyclone boulder, 40-60% of the land was washed off, metres of silt. So the decision was to plant them up, stop the erosion. So they've sort of done that in some parts, or, you know, huge improvement in erosion, but obviously we're faced with the slash that's coming out. I haven't done a lot of hauler work, but I work around a lot of guys that do, and we're talking about buffers or riparian strips. It's all good. We agree with it fully, but in relation to the industry, you can't haul any of that wood off that hill without going across mid-face on the other side, and then you're bound by WorkSafe. You're not allowed ropes through standing trees. So you're then trying to pull wood from the bottom, and then you're ground pounding, smashing the land. More advice is required, or we don't have to reinvent the wheel. This is the first rotation here on the coast, but around the nation is the fourth, fifth rotation. I shared this in 2018. Less hui hui, more dui dui.
Thanks, Sean. Never a truer word spoken. Kia ora, Sean. Thanks for that. Sean, can I? Mr. Haraki. Ka pai, Chief.
Thank you, Victor. I thought I was doing an online submission, but Katie Pai. Yeah, Sean Haraki, Uawa resident. Actually, I've got a forestry, production logging forestry background experience, but I'm going to talk more about, you know, saving the East Coast in just a few bullet points. So, Bill, I note you've got a local governance background and regional council entities, Canterbury. I feel that the Gisborne District Council may be not motivated to look after the environment as a unitary authority. So I leave that to you to consider, please. Matt, your forestry engineering experience. What I'd like to see is some way of tagging a piece of slash or an offcut on the skids so that I can trace it if it ends up on my beach. So there could be a mechanical device. There's mechanical harvesting now, is what they do. Or it could be a manual device for silvicultural maintenance of forests. Essentially, I'm thinking about a nail, something that can be traced with an identity on it. And thirdly, Madam Chair, this is a bit unreasonable because it's a bit outside the brief of the committee, but Huriarua Station has recently been sold to forestry. Not familiar with the contour of the land, but my understanding is it doesn't need to be planted to be stabilised. I would like to see the government step in there, with this committee's support, and perhaps we don't need to plant that, Madam Chair, and perhaps look at using it for farming, which it was originally for. So that's my three or four bullet points. Thank you.
Excellent, Sean. Thank you. Much appreciated. Kapai, now we've got Cousin Anne. Would you like me to bring you the mic?
Kia ora koutou, kia ora te teapu, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Ko Anne Maguire ahau. I was born here in Tolaga Bay 72 years and 10 months ago. And my lifelong passion has been the history of the whenua of Te Aitanga Hauiti. I want to go back into that history to about 1450, 1475, when Te Rāwhioro Wānanga was built and created. The lands around that wānanga were flatlands as well as hill country. The hill country was occupied by my tipuna in villages. They built their pā on those hillsides. The flatlands around those hills were used as marakai. They grew their gardens around there. Jump forward to approximately 1874. Te Whare Wānanga, by this stage, had closed. The 1874 legislation created the New Zealand Settlement Company, and through that company, land around this area was acquired for settlement. One of those lands was a piece called Tauwhare Pārai, 57,500 acres. It was eventually vested in the Gisborne Harbour Board, and the Gisborne Harbour Board was built around 1881-83. Jump forward to 1970, half of the Tauwhare Pārai block was sold off, and we call that the Waio half. The other half of it is still maintained by the Gisborne District Council through the Eastland Trust, or whatever it's now called. We also had, in that period of time, created mighty land incorporations. And so the Mangahea 2D incorporation was created. And in 1970s, the then management committee decided to grant to a forestry company a 99-year lease. That lease was signed in 1977. And in the 1980s, when I returned home from Waikato, I became part of what was called Te Aitanga Hauiti Manakaitiaki Rōpū. And it was our job as a rōpū to look at all the resource consents that affected the whenua around Uawa. Three of us got involved with negotiation with the forestry company. At the time, they wanted to harvest. Now, the consultation involved road mapping, involved the harvesting areas, archaeological reports, protection of waitapu, all of that sort of thing. Fantastic negotiation, fantastic consultation through the use of the Resource Management Act, using mainly sections 5, 6 and 7. And 8. So for the first 2 to 3 harvesting periods, the forestry company were very good in consulting with us, showing us the maps, showing us what we were doing, mapping archaeological sites that hadn't been previously mapped. Excellent consultation, excellent working relationship. After about starting the 3rd harvest, we heard nothing. New staff, change of management, I don't know what it was. But suddenly they weren't telling us anything. One of the things we had decided on was that they would clear all slash from the hills so that they wouldn't go into the Mangahao River. They did that for the first 2 harvests, but after the consultation with our mana kaitiaki group stopped, next minute we were seeing slash on the hillsides. Now don't get me wrong, people, about forestry. My husband worked in the forestry for over 40 years. And for 45 years, pine forests put bread and butter on my table. Okay, I finally convinced him that that's wrong, and he's retired. Yeah, being a bit of a bully. But what I'm saying is, I have seen our whenua deteriorate over the last 20 years or so. And so that's why I'm here today. I want you to look at that time period 2 that you were talking about, Hekia, the legislation. I think Totini referred to it too. What are we doing about the foreign ownership? That's legislation as well. That is the only way that I can see that we as tangata whenua of this land, that we can actually have a say in what happens and what goes on. The legislation needs to be workable for us as a people so that our land can go back to good production and good use. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Ian. Ka pai. Ooh. Those halcyon days of yore. Teitanga hauiti mana kaitiaki takes me back. Okay, I'm going to tempt fate here in quick succession. Nori Uawanui Hana. Ka pai.
E te tepu tēnā koutou. O tira tātou katoa e hui mai nei e tēnei pō. I wasn't actually going to get up and speak, but there were a couple of things you raised in the terms of reference that made me think that perhaps I would like to make a comment. But firstly, I'd like to talk about the school and the impact that it has on our curriculum and our operations at school. The school itself is safe in an adverse weather event. It's high enough up, and it is the base for the civil defence team. But in terms of the operations of the school, the effects of the slash and silt, not just on our families and our children that live in those areas that their homes have been inundated and in fact red and yellow stickered and whatnot, is the extra care that's needed to be taken when they return to school, their mental well-being, not just them, the other students that while their houses may not have been directly affected, they are related to somebody that is, and just the sheer number of events that we've had and the impact it has on the psyche. not just of the children, but of the staff. And we can't underestimate that. The other thing I'd say is that the impact of the silt and the slash on our beaches and river seriously limits the curriculum that we are able to make come alive for the children. Once the beach was their playground, their learning environment, where they had the beginnings of learning about ecology, about how the estuary works, about how what sort of species exist under tātara hake, all of those sorts of things. We haven't been able to do that kind of learning, hands-on, authentic learning, which we should be able to do in those areas because our beach is a mess most of the time. It's not just a mess, it's dangerous. The other area that is impacted is we sort of saw ourselves as developing quite a robust outdoor education program using the river. We cannot put the kids out on the river in their waka. It's not just about learning waka ama, it's the opportunity for them to traverse all the wahi tapu along the river, and they're not able to do that because it's not safe to get out there and do it. I know Kiriama and Kau aren't here, but Te Aki Tai, which is our surf life saving. Well, it's more than surf life saving. It's about surf life saving in Te Aitanga Hauiti. And they're not able to operate the programs that they need to operate. And these are all programs that help develop our young people. It also helps develop their identity of being from Hauiti, of being from Uawa. And those are all very much impacted. Like I said, we've had 6 events from February to February. We had 6 events. 6 events where they were serious enough that civil defence base had to be established at the school. And so I've moved away from talking about as the principal of the school, but I thought Greg might be here, but he's not, to talk about civil defence. And I didn't realise that talking about the adverse weather events was part of the inquiry. But I only have a couple of points to make there. Firstly, I'd just like to pay a tribute to our community because there's so many of them here tonight, and the responsible and safe way in which they conduct themselves every time we put out civil defence warnings. You know, we could get into a situation where we're like the boy who cried wolf too often because we have so many events that people may say, just another one, and not listen. And we're eternally grateful at Civil Defence that people take it seriously. They continue to take those messages seriously, and it saves lives. Over the past 7 years, we haven't had to establish a welfare centre as part of civil emergencies, because everybody has got those precautionary measures and safety practices and preparation in place for these events. So when they're announced, they know whether they're in the high-risk areas, whether they need to leave, what they have to prepare, where they're going, what they have to let us know. For some reason, we knew that Gabrielle, well, our intuition was telling us, well, I suppose you could call the Met Service our intuition, but telling us that it was going to be a serious event, so we did establish the welfare centre at Hauiti Marae this time. But everybody in here lived that experience, so I don't need to tell them. I do want to say, as a member of this community and as a member of civil defence, that our resilience and resolve has reached its maximum. As a member of civil defence, I really want you to tell the government that preparation for these events has to be greater than relying on a volunteer base. I've been with Civil Defence for 22 years here. I know that Marianne and a couple of others are in the room. They've been on it for 30 plus years. Every event, they turn up. And we're happy to do that, don't get me wrong. We like feeling that we've contributed to the safety of the community in these events. But even you, I'm sure, will agree that after 6 events in 12 months, it's becoming more than voluntary. The other thing that needs to happen with civil defence is that there has to be a fair investment in it, in the civil defence responses, because at times we were being treated as if we were paid employees of the Gisborne District Council. And the data that they were asking from our civil defence team to provide to them, one had a premise or an assumption that we hold a database of every home in Uawa, which is not the case. We'd love to have that, but we don't have that. The other thing civil defence has to do, has to come to terms with, is trusting their volunteers. And by this I mean that it will be no secret to this community, and especially those of you who were in serious need, that we did not get any welfare support or food supplies until the evening of the 6th day, when we had requested it on the 3rd day. And when it was requested, we were almost asked to fill out in triplicate name, age, address, what colour hair, eyes, whatever. The detail that was required was extraordinary in that circumstance. And I wonder why there is not a trust model with us, because the people who are involved in dealing with civil defence here, I'm the principal of the school. The school has a budget of $5.5 million of public money per annum. Greg Shelton is a farmer. I'm sure his land, somebody in here can tell us that his land is worth, a few $100,000 or $1 million, I'm not sure. He runs that operation. Te Aitanga Hauiti, led by Rena, is an almost $1 million operation. And we are trusted to account for that public funding for our organisations, but somehow we are not trusted when lives are at stake. So those are the 2 messages that I would like passed on. I'm conscious that we've never had the opportunity, we haven't had the opportunity to have a review of what happened in Hale and Gabrielle. And my fear is that we will just move on to the next event without allowing us the opportunity to raise these issues as part of that. I have to say that Gabrielle was extreme. It was hard on our base team while it was happening. It was hard on the hauora and their welfare role that they played, and we did it. But I equally say to you, the first time in 22 years, a few of us on the team started to doubt whether we could continue, given we haven't had the opportunity to improve systems. I understand it was an extraordinary event, and everybody was doing the best that they could, but we could do a whole lot more. But I just wonder, sorry, I know I'm taking a long time, Victor's giving me the evil eye behind me. But, no, it's not bacon yet. I also just want to come back to a couple of statements by the forestry companies that they have on their websites. And I just want to read them. I'm not going to name them, they'll figure out their own statement. But one of them says they're growing a future for generations to come. They are growing one, it's just not the one that we want or need. They also say they are passionate about striving to be the best in everything they do. Well, they are in terms of silt and slash. From helping our people succeed and delivering long-term value to our stakeholders, this is the part, to embracing the communities we call neighbours and caring for the land that we are privileged to be guardians of. They are only renters. They are not guardians. We're the guardians of that land. And another one says that they are active, open and honest. We seek to develop respect, integrity and trust with our staff, contractors, customers and the communities we operate in through active, honest and transparent engagement. There has been no active, honest and transparent engagement. From what I can see is each forestry company senses the pulse in our community about where the squeakiest wheel is, and they will go and deal with them. They have never come together to regularly discuss an approach moving forward. So they may have all these wonderful values on their sites, but they're just words, they aren't enacted. Kia ora.
Right. Kia ora, Nori. Okay, our last two rōpū, I'd like to, it gives me great privilege to call upon Uawanui to present. And if you'd all like to come up here, that would be great. Gosh, you come up?
Kia ora tātou. Kia ora hikia. My name's Elizabeth Puha. I am the manager of the Uawanui Sustainability Project, and I'd really love for you to see our presentation. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, tēnā koutou, i te tipu. I am representing Uawanui Cultural Environmental Sustainability Project today. We are currently 14 years into our 100-year strategy. I'd like to present our strategy to you. Thank you. Uawanui is currently focusing on whakapapa, whenua, history, native nursery production, riparian planting, riparian fencing, weed, pest control, picking up a lot of rubbish, and wood debris identification down here at the beach. I'm just going to pass it to another member of Uawanui, Maya King.
Tēnā koe te wān. Kia ora. Uawanui has significant relationships with our marae, local landowner and corporations, the forestry, schools, kohanga and other various learning institutions, the Uawa community, the Gisborne District Council and also the government agencies. We acknowledge that there is a problem with land use in Uawa. We live with it every day. On behalf of Uawanui, it would be a privilege to be part of the solution. Madam Chairperson, thank you for the opportunity to present. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora Uawanui, thank you for that. Kia ora, and so hei kōrero whakamutunga, hei whakakapi hoki I tā tātou hui tēnei ahi pō. Kia ora Hana.
Kia ora te whānau. Tēnā tātou katoa. Ko te karaka te maunga, ko mga opeka te waiu, ko te whānau a te rangi pureora, me Ngāti Kuranui ngā hapu, ko te amowhiu te tīpuna, ko Puketa Wai, te marae, ko Hana Skywalker ahau. Tihei mauri ora. Au e te amowhiu, maranga mai. Ki te arataki e, o mokopuna e karanga nei, maranga arataki mai. Tēnā tātou katoa. Today, I stand before you as a proud mokopuna of Te Amowhiu, who was a descendant of Tamatea Paia, the eldest son of our ancestor Hauti, of Hingangaroa. From their time until now, we, the hapu of Te Whānau Ātirangi Pureora and Ngāti Kuranui, have been faithful caretakers of our coastline. We are coastal people. Our border stretches from the Uawa River in the south to Maro in the north. This territory, our tūranga waiwai, includes Tātara Hake, Karaka Bay, Pairo, Kaiaua, and Maro. Today, the base of Te Whānau Ātirangi Pureora and Ngāti Kuranui is at Puketawai Marae. Although not directly part of this inquiry, but actually now that we've heard the structure, it kind of is, it is related. Our marae, along with Hinemoria, suffered greatly in Cyclone Gabrielle. We were in the midst of a total marae rebuild. We had completed the brand new wharenui and the ablution block, and were just about to start the new wharekai when the cyclone hit. We were completely flooded inside and out. We never got the chance to celebrate our hard work thus far. Instead, we were plunged into mourning our loss, a massive clean-up operation, and having to deliberate the future of our marae. Our timeline has been put back about 2 years now, instead of our grand opening that we had planned for October this year. I only provide this brief overview of our situation to give a context for the points I would like to make today, because it is the cumulative effect of all these challenges that weighs heavily on our hapu at this time. E taku koka me ohua whakarongo mai ki te tangi o te ngākau. I, along with my cousin Jenna Lee, who is here today, are the co-secretaries of our humble marae, Puketawai Marae. Kaiaua Road, Tolaga Bay. And it is on behalf of our marae that I make this submission today. I am here to speak about the impact of the slash, the woody debris and flooding, and the impact these major weather events have had on us, our well-being as tangata whenua, and ultimately the shift in our cultural paradigm and the way in which we live our individual and collective lives. There are 4 major ways in which we are impacted. 1, access to our traditional kai gathering, which has already been mentioned today. 2, damage to our wāhi tapu, which has already been mentioned as well. 3, practical expression of our kōrero tukuiho, intergenerational transmission of our cultural knowledge and practices. And 4, the cumulative effect on our wairua and waiora, our health and well-being. Currently, there is little to no access to Tātara Hake, to Karaka Bay and Kaiaua Bay. Why? Because the access points are covered in silt and slash, making crossing hazardous and dangerous for able-bodied people, let alone tamariki and pakeke. Kaimoana gathering is increasingly dangerous at Kaiaua, Karaka Bay and Tātara Hake, as the beaches and waterways are filled with slash. In fact, the kai itself, such as boo-boos, tuatua, and paua, and other shellfish, are missing along the rocks, which are now inundated with slash of all sizes. Excuse me. This means that we are unable to access our kāpata kai, and the sea life in our kāpata kai are unable to access their kāpata kai, the healthy and nutritious food sources that have fed our people for generations. We are no longer able to share our traditional kai gathering practices with our children. Physical activity is impossible. Our natural playgrounds are now hazardous places where we are unable to walk along the beach or to walk along the sand and reach the beach. Swimming, surfing, nippers, tiakitai, diving are all treacherous as we are uncertain about the nature and extent of the logs buried under the water. Our wāhi tapu are being eroded by slash and logs, constantly pounding on the now rapidly receding coastline. This is unearthing and revealing very old urupa, our tipuna, remains and taonga. To be fair, this was happening when it was just big king tides, but now it is exacerbated by the inundation of slash and logs. I have seen our pakeke and our local policemen have to reinter these remains on several occasions. We rely on our access to waitai seawater for mental, spiritual, physical, for physical, mental and spiritual well-being, not just any waitai, our waitai from our special places. This is a practice our nannies have taught us since babies. The sea is a place of healing. If we have haki, scabs, have a dip in the sea. If we're feeling mentally unwell, have a dunk in the sea. Go and get some waitai and sprinkle yourself. Sprinkle every wall in your house. Without safe access to waitai, my 83-year-old nana, who has been doing this since she was a small girl, is now unable to practice these ancient healing traditions, which would be of huge benefit, especially in the troubling times we currently face. She simply can't get to the beach, and we can't get her there either. Excuse me. I've got it. Ultimately, we are devastated that our uri will never know our sun-kissed coastline as the natural learning environment it was meant to be. The kapatakai it's meant to be. My daughter is now 10, and she, her younger brother, and cousins have never seen our beaches how they should be, pristine and safe. They have no memory of it. This really saddens me, all of us. Their memories are of beaches covered in slash. Every time we have significant rainfall, of diggers piling up mountains of wood debris, of worrying when they go to the beach that they will be hurt from the protruding wood, feeling unsafe in the sea. They have little knowledge of how we learnt as kids and the generations before us. We gathered, we swam, we played, we fought, we told stories, we learnt, we loved, we mourned, we prayed, we sang, we ate, we healed. And most importantly, we passed these practices on to those who came after us. Without this crucial part of our takiwā coastline, our sanctuary, our paradise, I fear how we will teach our descendants the bounty and wonder that is their birthright. A unique birthright that cannot be found anywhere else in the world. E te tepu, on behalf of Te Whānau a Te Rangi Pureora and Ngāti Karanui, I ask that this commission of inquiry include our voice in the report and give urgent recommendations that will return the use of our tūranga waiwai, our takutai moana, to us in a similar state it was prior to the harvesting of the forests and the flood of slash that has besieged us in the past 5 years or so. In the past 5 or so years. This is our voice, our story, our place. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Han. And kia ora, everybody. Me te whakaro nui I puta, I whakapuakina I tēnā o koutou, I tēnei pō. Kia ora tātou. So thank you all very much for the thoughts and the kōrero that you've shared with us tonight. Before I ask Jack to do our final karakia, I'd like to hand it back to the Honourable Hekia Prata.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you. Thank you very much for the honesty and the deep integrity with which you have told your stories and asked for us to hear the pain that sits within them. We promise that we will do our very best to honour your honesty and your sharing and your tenacity and determination and commitment to who you are in your place, in your time, in the joining of former generations to present generations to the future. Thank you. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora no tātou. So, kia ora, Jack, could I ask you to do our closing karakia? 2 for the price of 1 would be good. A karakia to finish our hui off, and bless our kai, that would be beautiful.
He honore, he kororia, mangarongo ki te whenua. Whakaro, pai e, ki ngā tangata katoa. Ake ake, ake ake, amene. Te atua, te piringa, oku oranga. Toku oranga. E te ato nui tēnei ki a koe, te tatawai ki a tātou, ko whaiti mai nei, I rota tēnā hui tēnei rā. Mā hau tiaki e manaki tia o tātou rangatira, me o rātou kai mahi, ko tai mai nei te koro ki a tātou, tai no ki rātou I tū ki runga ki te koro, mo te kaupapa o tēnei rā. Tua ki a rātou te whakapai, te whakaoro tō tātou riki o iu kraiti, ki ora katoa rātou tīnana, ngā kau wairua hoki. Mā tō ihi, me tō mana rātou e whakakaha, ke tautono tō rangi Māria ki rungi a rātou, ke tautono tō aroha ki roki a rātou. E te atua whakangiu mai tō wairu tapa wanga nui a tātou, o tātou pakake, rangatahi, mokopuna, rātou te whānau, ke te māwiwi, ke te pauri, rātou roto o tātou whare hohi pera, taini ki ngā whare pakake. Tauwhitia mai rātou I tō kaha, oranga ngākau tia rātou I tō whakawehi, whakanoha tia te rangi Māria me te ara roti rātou. I te me, ko koe te atua o te tika, o te pono o te aroha, I no e tēnei rota tō tama I ukaiti, āmene. Kia hora te marinoa, kia whakapapa paurumu te moana, kia tera te mā rohi rohi o te māramatanga o te kraiti I mui o koutou huarahi. May the calm be widespread, may the sea glisten like the green stone, and may the light of Christ dance across your pathways. Kia uturu ki a tātou katoa, ngā manaakitanga te ato kaharawa, a te matua, a te tama, a te wairua tapu. Āmene. Ka huri. E te ato whakapaingia ngā kai. Hei oranga mō tātou tīnana, whāngia mā te wairua te taro te ora, koe ho kreiti hoki tō mātou reki. Āmene. That means I don't think I need to go for a meal.